Projekt Hoaxy a podvody vám z Kyjeva prináša rozhovor s Ľudmylou Dolhonovskou, ktorá pôsobila ako poradkyňa pre strategickú komunikáciu náčelníka generálneho štábu Ozbrojených síl Ukrajiny, generála Valeria Zalužného. Veľmi dobre si pamätá prvé dni vojny, ktoré prežila v bunkri, pričom jej statusy a spravodajstvo zasiahli v tom čase milióny ľudí. Je autorkou knihy a Železný generál, lekcie ľudskosti a stále aj v tejto dobe sa venuje strategickej komunikácii a poskytuje poradenstvo kľúčovým službám. Sme radi, že ju môžeme privítať v podcaste a v rozhovore pre projekt Hoaxy a podvody. Cestu do Ukrajiny podporila nadácia Otvorenej spoločnosti a boj proti hoaxom môžete podporovať aj vy, keď sa stanete členom klubu lovcov hoaxov. Viac informácií nájdete v linkoch pri tomto videu. Dear Ludmila, thank you very much for finding your time for this interview. I would start with the first days of the war. How do you remember on that? Because I could find some information about you that your information posts had reached like in millions of views.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this interview. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, of course, like the 24th of February 2022 will always stick in my memory, as in the memory of many Ukrainians, as an unfortunate, very tragic day. At the same time, it's a day of our strength and resilience. I, as a civilian personnel of the armed forces, had a choice. I could rather work remotely or just come to my working place. Just dealing with the sensitive information usually doesn't give you any options, and being on your working place, go to the headquarters, which I've actually done. So early morning of February 24th, I left at that time my 9-year-old son and just moved to the general staff, our office, and I knew, like from the very beginning, and every of my colleagues clearly understood that we don't have any other option than communicate. You know, if you are not fulfilling the informational space, it will be done by someone else, in most cases by your adversary. So from the first hours of the full-scale war, we've started releasing the operational updates about the situation on the front line. We did it every 4 hours with the translation into English language, not only Ukrainian. And I persisted also to have a video recording of those updates in order for TV channels, for YouTube broadcasters to have the content from Ukrainian armed forces, which have this information and have the all rights to share our vision of what's going on the front line, to share the truth in order not to let Russians to dominate in the information domain. So that was like the essence of the first days of the full-scale war, just to keep different audiences in Ukraine and outside Ukraine updated about the situation in Ukraine. Also, I was responsible for the social media accounts of the commander-in-chief himself. So I just clearly understood that we have also to motivate people, and I used his authority and his channels to motivate people to send this message to them that the commander is here, all military command is here, no panics. If you can take the weapon, please join the armed forces. If you can't, please support the resistance movement and just resist these occupation forces.
So maybe the key goals or elements of the stratcom in the first hours of the war was to overtake the information space and to motivate the general people.
Yes, that's correct. Like these first strategic goals to keep people informed about the situation and to motivate people to keep this high morale, they were super important. At the same time, we had this third strategic objective, which was to push Russians to surrender, not to take part in this war. In order to achieve these goals, we published the post that we guarantee that we are committed to the rules and norms of international humanitarian law. So if you decide to surrender, we guarantee that you will save your life. And Also, we started posting the information about the losses of Russian forces in order to give them the understanding how damaging this war is not only to Ukraine and Ukrainians, but also to their own population, which we supposed will have the impact. I clearly remember when the number of Russian losses were equal to the losses in two Chechen wars. One day it was equal to the losses in Afghanistan. And I was posting those infographics like comparison. And for me, it was clearly that people have to stop this war. They have to somehow rise and resist what's going on in Russia, because this war has no substance, no justification to be here. And unfortunately, that was our probably mistake, that there is some, some line which Russians wouldn't cross. It looks like there are no lines. They are ready to lose as many people as they want in order to have control over my country.
And did you take in consider possible Kyiv's downfall? Because many politicians were talking about that they expected absolute loss of Kiev and all parts of Ukraine in a matter of days.
The threat was real. I can't say, of course, now, when you see at these events, from the time of more than 3 years, you can find different arguments to say that different scenarios could happen, but at that time the threat was so obvious. But again, that's the risks you take when you decide to be the part of your nation, the part of the resistance, the part of the armed forces. You are just, I clearly realize that being at our headquarters, I am on the military object number 1 in the country, which of course makes us a target and makes me and my colleagues in danger. But that's the risks you are taking, and I don't think that these risks are higher than people who had to take those risks in Luhansk, Donetsk area, Kherson region, Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, many civilian places which became the targets for Russians, were also unsecure.
You mentioned the first days of the stratcom in the war. So for me, it sounds like the stratcom was prepared well before.
Yes, I can say that yes. Why? Because it took us for 1.5 years to build this institutional capacity. What I'm trying to express that the stratcom department of the armed forces was established in April 2020. So we had 1.5 years, almost 2 years, to prepare ourselves to the challenge, to this crisis communication which we had. And thanks to this, because we understand that stratcom is a function. You have different branches within it, public diplomacy, you have public affairs, you have military public affairs, information operations, psychological operations, all these different branches, but they have to be coordinated, and it should be some center of gravity, which controls and just gives this narrative and monitors the results and adjust your activities accordingly. So we had this stratcom department, which is institutional strength number 1. Second, we had time to prepare the stratcom doctrine. And when it's on paper, especially when we are talking about military, it's super important to have this direct chain of command, rules and responsibilities. Everything has to be on paper, crystal clear, in order people to know what they have to do. And also, of course, I cannot ignore the fact it's super important. It's even more important than what I've said just a moment ago. It's that we have the war since 2014. And our public affairs officers and structures within the armed forces, they were so experienced, by the moment of 2022, having this time, 8 years to prepare themselves to just to understand like how to communicate, where are the boundaries of operational security, how to arrange their work of the journalists on the front line and make it safe, and also again from a military perspective to have these rules of operational security confirmed. So all of these was like our strengths. We had institutional capacity, we had doctrine, strategies, and we had experienced people with their knowledge and skills coming back to 2014 with all this lines. So that was our strength, I would say.
When I was working for the state and kind of lead the stratcom in Slovakia, I met with some struggles, like for example, lack of people, lack of hardware, software, everything like that. So you think that you were lucky to have some support from the leadership from the day one, or did you need to persuade them to support you more?
I have to say that on the military level, because we have also a military political level, which is our Ministry of Defense. I'm talking about the armed forces, so I can speak for the armed forces. We had 100% support from the commander-in-chief. He understood the importance of communication stuff, and he let us do our job. And that's critically important. When I have lectures now for some commanders and heads of different departments, of different companies, and I'm teaching stratcom, I always repeat to them that you have, as a leadership, you have to understand the importance of communication. It's not just a service function where we can just tell about what are you doing on the daily basis and just deal with some press briefings and something. It's much deeper. It's much more complex. It requires skilled people, structure, again, institutional capacity, and it takes time, it takes resources, but this is your superpower. When you take a look on NATO, last line joint doctrine on strategic communications, they describe stratcom as a military function, as a capability, as a super important, part of their management system within the military domain. So it just, I think when the leadership doesn't have this knowledge and understanding of the communication domain, it's a loss. Everyone is losing in this part, in this situation. We were fortunate to have the commander who understood and supported our effort. And that was, I think, our super strength.
In Slovakia, but also in other countries, there are leaders who are not saying that stratcom is not important, or for example, that the state should not be involved in the fake news war or something like that, that it should be all about the freedom of speech. What do you think about such opinions?
I would advise, if I could give some advice to these people who say this stuff, I would advise them to take a look on Gerasimov's doctrine, dated in 2013. At that time already, Russians envisioned communication as a part of their forces, as a part of their capabilities, not kinetic one, but super critically important. And in that doctrine, comparison between non-kinetic and kinetic strengths was 4-to-1. So military, the exact military power is only 1/4 from the entire capabilities which state has. And information is one of those capabilities of the country, of any state, alongside with military strength, with diplomacy, with economic power, with energy. So that's if you don't acknowledge that, if you don't understand that, that's that makes you weak. That makes you loser in comparison with those who use this power. It's like, you know, if you have some strengths of like right hand, but you said, no, I won't be using this. I will fight only with my left hand because I know it for decades, for centuries. It's like, okay, I will fight for you. I will use two my hands and just let's see who will win in this war. And what is more important that the exact kinetic conflict, the war itself as armed conflict as we have, for example, in Ukraine, doesn't mean that the enemy doesn't use other tools. They are still continuing to conduct a hybrid warfare against us and against Western societies. You can see it especially during the elections campaigns where this interference is huge. Nowadays, with the social media, with all these TikToks, YouTube channels, everything, it's much easier because you have more channels of communication. You just use same propaganda stuff which you could use during World War II, for example, but at that time you had only radio and newspapers. Now you have this variety of digital channels and you can approach the audiences in whatever, like, you know, time, age group, like level of society. And that doesn't mean that we have to just, you know, okay, it is what it is. What can we do? We have a lot of tools to fight with it, you know, to tackle these issues. One of them, as you rightly mentioned, is fighting with disinformation, just debunking all these fake myths, yeah. But that's for the rational level of understanding. We also have this emotional, cognitive perception, yeah. So it's also important, and here is the critical role of stratcom, because when you have your agenda, you don't let their other, like, you know, stakeholders, enemies, like adversaries, whoever it is, to interfere in that scale as you can do that if you are not communicating proactively. Yeah. If you control the domain, if you have your narratives, if you have your vision, if you share it as a state that here is our vision of the situation, here is our position on XYZ, that's like makes you stronger and people have like at least different opinions, yeah? The second point, I think super critically important, is to have independent media. This is your filter. This is like when I'm talking to my students, I usually explain them that information is like a food. When you're buying something in the shop, you look at the, like, you know, at the paper and you see which ingredients it includes, yeah? If it's something unhealthy, you would most likely not to pick it. So same with information. You have always to check, like, what is the source of information? What ingredients are they? But of course, people don't have so much time, yeah, for that. That's a job for professional journalists, to be that filter and to feed the societies with a healthy food, like, which is also information, yeah, I mean this metaphor. So, and that's like, you know, critically important. And alongside with stratcom efforts, which are coming from the state, with independent media and media literacy of the population, I think it should be developed like from the kindergarten, when the little kids and you are explaining them how to differentiate fakes from the truth, where are facts and where are just opinions, yeah, where some different people can share their opinions which are not facts itself, yeah, how you can differentiate, how you can find the truth, how you can verify the information, which channels you can use, because it's also like dangerous for their physical and psychological, like, you know, growth. So many areas which have to be addressed, and that means that the leadership has to acknowledge that it's their responsibility, that they have to find right people and invest a lot of resources if they want to somehow keep the democracy, keep their nations, because otherwise, like, the enemies will, regardless what we are doing, they will be pushing and they will be doing what they can do the best. And we know that they are skilled in propaganda. Look at Russian society. Look at them. Like, how is it like possible to go to die, to let your sons, to let your husbands go and die on someone's territory, which you has nothing to do with it? Like, yeah, for what? But they are so deeply brainwashed that they are doing this. They are losing their lives, they are losing their health, they are losing their kids. For what? For trying to occupy and conquer the independent nation, which wants just, to live, to grow our kids, as I'm doing as a mother. We have this history, and we are in the historic museum. We have our culture, we have our language. We are a peaceful nation. Don't come to us with weapon, and we will coexist as good neighbors. But no, they picked another way for themselves, and that's also the propaganda role is huge in that.
You mentioned Russian propaganda, and I think we could talk for days about their activities towards Ukraine, but let's focus on smaller countries like Slovakia. So what do you think is the main goal of the Russian propaganda towards countries like Slovakia, like smaller states?
My point here is that their objective could be just to undermine Western unity. They don't need to control the countries, they don't need the governments probably, but they need some destabilization inside European Union, inside NATO, just to destroy these alliances. And in order to achieve that, they will use every tool. Just trust me. They will be using your kids, they will be using your corrupted politicians, they will be using economic business superpower, they will be using culture as a poisoning instrument, everything. You have to realize that there are no moral barriers for the people who choose this strategy of expansion, destabilization, destroyment. It's not a healthy and creative power. It's a complete evil.
How Ukrainian stratcom developed since the beginning of the war? Because at the beginning you said it was about to overtake information space and to motivate people. Are these goals the same, or maybe you would like to add some more? And is it maybe the hardest challenge to motivate people at this point?
Yeah, there are obviously many challenges. It's really difficult to fight long wars. It's much easier to have a super quick wars, because there is this impulse from the society, to fight, to be resilient, and with the time, people are exhausted, many families are destroyed, soldiers are super tired, and our losses again are huge. All of these factors, of course, they just, somehow decrease the morale. You cannot be so motivated and strong as you were at the beginning of the full-scale war. Just, for example, it's natural scene. So from a communication standpoint, that means that you have to find different ways to talk to the society in the most transparent, credible way, to have this dialogue. You cannot feed people with the fairy tales that we will win in 2-3 days. It doesn't work. You have to have the serious conversations, and that's super complex. That's a very difficult task due to the reasons which are so natural. And that means that you, as a state, you have to find its ways to build the dialogue, to find the channels, to find the people who are trustworthy for the society, to find the real military leaders and to promote them in order to make this example for other generations of Ukrainians, and just, So it requires a lot of resources. I see that our stratcom capabilities developed highly and rapidly due to the situation we are in. You are growing because of the problems of the daily basis situations you have to overcome, and that's I think I want our stratcom experts to share that experience with our partners, because it's something you cannot gain in the auditorium. You can gain it only in the field, tackling the real crisis. And that's the experience I want us to share, and every a specialist on different level, either it's a press officer on the brigade level or stratcom advisor on the level of strategic management of the armed forces or the level of MOD or the president's office. All of these experts have such a deep knowledge and experience. We have our dozens of our victories and dozens of our failures. So it's better for you to learn in our experience, have these lessons for yourselves, and that's how we can be stronger together.
Maybe let's be concrete.
Yeah.
One example for the greatest success and one example for greatest loss or failure.
I would say the greatest success was that we could obtain this information dominance. I think that the voice of Ukraine, the voice of Ukrainian military was quite loud in the world. And that was because we were communicated, not keeping silence. So that's more like a success, and I think we have to be proud of this. As an example of failure, I can just to speak widely, it's our inability to manage so many journalists and bloggers who were coming to Ukraine in the first days, weeks, months of the full-scale war. There were thousands of people coming to Ukraine trying to cover what's going on, and we didn't have this institutional capacity to arrange their work, to provide with accreditation, to do that fast, to check every person who is coming, to manage all these issues when it's about operational security, how close they can be to the military, when and how they can work. And that's that's the reality of the war. Yeah, you have always to keep this balance between freedom of speech and your desire, natural desire as a nation to be on the first headlines of top media outlets. On the other hand, you have this issue with operational security, with military who don't want to spend their time of managing some journalists. So it was really difficult. And to be more specific, when we had this liberation of Kherson city, that was the only regional center which was occupied by Russians in 2022. So it was liberated on November 11th, 2022, and we didn't manage to organize media coverage. Mm-hmm. We were so slow, we didn't have first permissions from military, from politicians to bring militaries. One people were telling us it's too dangerous, a lot of stuff is mined, security service is doing what they have to do, in order to provide the filtration, etc., all the measures which are coming next to liberation of the territory. And some journalists, very brave people and professional people were there, and they broadcasted live from Kherson, which was super important, I think, for the entire world to see the success, to see that Ukraine is not only fallen, Ukraine is capable to win. But we didn't manage to organize the normal work for many, many other colleagues, and that's what I'm very sorry for. And if I could come back to those times, I would behave differently. I would do everything I could in order to give them the chance to do their job, to be there, and to make the world know about this huge success of Ukrainian people.
Stratcom is a very wide term. So who is part of a Ukraine Stratcom? Maybe everyone?
No, you cannot say that everyone is a part of Stratcom, but definitely, this is a state function. If we take a look from a more governmental perspective, not from a business perspective, because Stratcom is also used in business and it has different description in that case. When we are talking about a state point of view, Stratcom is again the capability, the function of the state to pursue their goals. And in order to do that, we have the our powers, yeah, our branches, these components of stratcom, which is public diplomacy, and public diplomacy that everything which state is doing abroad. And we have many examples, like take as example like cultural forces under the armed forces who are having like their concerts, exhibitions abroad, and just trying to tell the story about the war to the wider audiences, yeah. And many other, like our public diplomacy includes like everything, cultural diplomacy, our Ukrainian cuisine, all these like, you know, exhibitions, everything we have. Even the sports diplomacy, this recent victory of Alexander Usyk over Dubois, that just is such a big news for Ukraine. So it's also our superpower, and we have to communicate those successes properly, and that's what the state also have to dig in and use as an informational, like, you know, reason to speak about Ukraine, to remind people about our fight. The second point, of course, this is public affairs, and I will add here military public affairs, which I was involved the most of my professional career. So, and that's again, that's an important part of stratcom, when you let people like you, professional bloggers, journalists, media experts, to tell your story. Yeah, I don't have the channel which you have, I don't have your audience, but I am working with you to deliver my message so that the audience, your audience is aware about like our country, about the story what I'm sharing with you now. So that's extremely important. And two other dimensions, which are information operation and psychological operation, they are the part of the military force and critically important during the war times. So in order to be successful in these dimensions, you have to prepare. If I could do some like recommendations, I would say use this time to prepare. You will be lucky if you don't have to use it in the real situations. But if you are not prepared and the war comes to your country, you will lose, like if you don't have this capacity prepared.
The last question is, and maybe you already like answered this with these last sentences, but I will try anyway. What would you say to those Slovak people who still believes in Russian propaganda, who still supports Russia in this conflict? What is your message to them?
It's extremely difficult, like, to find the right words, because for us as Ukrainians, for us as kids and parents who are always at risk, just because Russian missiles, drones, bombs are falling into our heads for nothing. We haven't done anything to Russia, anything bad to Russians. Why are we suffering? If you are believe in them, just come to Ukraine and see what's going on your own eyes. I think that will be the most fair, justified approach. Just come and see, talk to people, just see with your own eyes what's going on here. And it's better than look at the situations through a screen of your smartphone or your TV. Just come and see and talk to people and try to understand it as it were your like friends, neighbors, brothers, sisters. I think we all have to be human beings first of all.
Thank you very much for your time and all the best. Good luck.
Thank you so much for having me.